Today we're going to be looking at what shell casings mean when you find them on crime scenes. I've been teaching this for police officers for like 15 years now. And every time I get a brand new cop on the department that I'm training, I like to pull out my big old bag of shell casings and show them all sorts of different stuff so that the first time that they see it out on the road is not in real life at 3 o'clock in the morning with 400 milligrams of caffeine in them and they haven't slept for 16 hours. They can see not only what shell casings look like, also what the projectiles that come out of them look like after they actually hit things, which is surprising for a lot of people, and what these different things might mean for their safety and for the investigation. My name's Tommy, this is Free Field Training. I've been a police officer for 18 years, a trainer for probably 15, 16 now, and I am a firearms instructor. And armor and handcuffing instructor, a bunch of other stuff that's not pertinent to this particular video. But we have lined up here a bunch of different casings all the way from 22, and I've even got some BBs over there that you can barely see, 940, 45, revolver rounds, rifle rounds, shotgun rounds, and then we've got a whole bunch of the projectiles for you guys to look at. So that way you can see what all of this stuff looks like when you actually find it out on the road, and you can identify it and understand what you're looking at. Let's start off with old versus new shell casings and ammunition. So this one over here is brand new. That's a brand new casing, just fired today. You can tell it's got very little of any type of corrosion on it. It's undented. The top of the casing is still pretty circular. You can see there's no dirt and grime inside the lettering on the back of that shell casing. The primer pocket is still pretty clean. And we've got a pretty circular and round face of the shell casing. Now you will notice that there is some corrosion around the edge here. There's a little blackening around the edge. A lot of people would think that that comes from the casing being old, but a lot of that blackening right there on the edge, that is just burnt powder. That's what happens when something gets super, super hot. Now in contrast, this is a casing that has seen a lot. Like, it looks pretty clean from this angle, but as soon as you turn it, you can see that the top of it is ovaled from either being stepped on or run over, probably not by a car, maybe from a bicycle or something like that, or getting kicked down the block. It's also got a big chunk taken out of it. Now, this is not necessarily indicative of something that is old. It may be that the case has blown out, but you can see that this is pushed in, not blown outward. So it's not a burst casing. This is from something getting run over by a car or a bike or someone stepping on it. So if you find this on a scene, it's not necessarily not evidence of the crime that you are investigating or the shooting that you're investigating, but if what you had just happened and you've got something like this laying on the ground and there's stuff inside of this thing, there's like gravel and stuff coming out of it, this in all likelihood has been sitting somewhere for a while. So that is less fresh. You see all the little dents along the casing. Next, we're going to look at some projectiles, old versus new. This is the most common type of projectile, oddly enough, that you're going to see. I always like to show people the things that are really likely to show up on your very normal crimes and then work up from there to your homicides and stuff like that. This is a brand new BB, relatively new BB, straight out of the box. And this is one that's been sitting around for a while. So if you've got a broken window and you look down on the window frame and there's that sitting right there, that's something that happened, a BB that got thrown pretty recently. And if it's that might be from a different incident. And those are pretty common things. Now the same thing goes with our projectiles over here. We're going to look at the coloration on projectiles and give you kind of an age range on them. So this one right here is very, very fresh. This was just from yesterday, shooting this at a piece of steel. And that's very common shape for projectile that you might find, and that is just a soft lead core. This is a copper jacket that's kind of old. You know what the bullet looks like before it goes into the gun. That's the copper color. And this is it turning green over time from sitting outside. And then this is an older piece of shotgun shell. So if you find that on a scene, that means that a shotgun was fired, and this is the little top of the shell that's left over. Sometimes you get shotgun shell wads or plugs that'll look like these. They're little fiber plugs. Those are pretty common. And this is an older piece of lead core. Now the most common ones, of course, are going to be these three. You're going to have copper that's old, copper that's new. This is a brand new lead core, and this is what that lead core is going to look like after a few days only of sitting outside. It's going to start corroding. It's not going to have that shiny surface color anymore. Next, we're going to move into our different calibers of rounds and the relative sizes of them. So here is some 22, some rimfire ammunition. This is extremely common. It used to be a lot more common. So I'll give you these next to each other so you get a kind of a good comparison. This is 22 short. So this is a rimfire round. What rimfire means is that the strike on the back of the casing is on the rim of it. Show you that right there. You can see there's a little dent on the back of the case right there, and then the length of it tells you that this is a 22 short. So you can see the shortened casing there, and then the bullet sitting on top. And this is a 22 long rifle. These are your most common ones that you're going to find out there. Now there's other sizes. You got 22 Magnum, which is a little bit longer, and you got 22 long that sits in between these two. Here, I'll line them up so you can kind of see relative sizes there. But these are 22 short is really, really common just because it's available. And 22 long rifle is very, very common because handguns are commonly chambered in it. Lots of rifles are chambered in it, and it's the cheapest ammunition to be able to carry around for a 22. And this is a 22 long rifle casing. We'll slide it right back in there again so you can see that. You can see it really well on there, the little divot on the end of the casing. So that's the firing pin striking the primer, which is the entire outside edge of the 22. And now I'm going to keep these in my hand and show you a 9mm shell casing here. This is our relative size, in case you've never seen a 22. That's your relative size of 9mm casing, and here's a 9mm unfired round. So you can see kind of relative size comparison of what 22 looks like. Now these 9mm rounds are most likely to be found on scene. You can see back here, I'll put this between my fingers again so we can see the end of it. That's the primer down there in the middle, and you can see the little divot on the primer there. That is where the firing pin has struck the primer. That's what causes the round to go off. And you can see this is a unfired case. You can see the primer, no divot in there. Now we'll talk about head stamping. This is a head stamp on the end. Let me see if I can zoom in enough where you can see the head stamp there. So you see is WIN, that's for Winchester, and then 9mm Luger on the outside edge. So when you inventory a shell casing, this is the most common type that you're going to inventory, all the head stamps are going to be different. Some of them are just going to say 9mm, some are going to say 9mm Luger. That doesn't mean that it was from a Luger handgun, it just means that that's the caliber. That's one of the nomenclatures for the caliber of 9mm. And then at the top, there's going to be the different manufacturers' names or brand names. One that throws a lot of people off is Starline brass. It's going to have a star, a line, and a star, or a star and just a line on it. What you want to do when you're inventorying these things is just write whatever it says in quotes. So for this, I would write quote, WIN, leave a space, 9mm Luger, end quote, is the head stamp on that one. So to give you an idea of scale, here is 9mm loaded. Here's a 9mm casing, 40 loaded, a 40 caliber casing, and 45 ACP loaded and a 45 ACP casing. This is what you're going to find on most crime scenes, is these types of things. And as you can see, they're all very similar when it comes to the way the cartridges look. They're just going to be marked differently. This one says Winchester and 45 auto on the head stamp. You've got that same divot in the primer, and it's just a larger size than our 9mm casing. So these are pretty easy to see the difference between after you see them on the street the first couple of times. 40 is sometimes a little harder to differentiate from 9 without getting down on the ground and looking at that head stamp to see what size it is. Now as far as live rounds, there's some differentiation that we can talk about. This is 9, 40, and 45. This is ball ammo for a 40. It tends to have a flat top on it. So if you see a round with a flat top on it laying on the street, that's probably a live round of 40. 45 ACP can sometimes have a flat top. Mostly it's round ball, and 9mm is normally more pointed in your ball variety of ammo. Now, all of these have hollow point varieties and a bunch of different specialty varieties. This is one of the more common ones that you're going to see laying on the ground. It's just going to have a brass or copper jacket around the outside edge. It's going to be some sort of different metal around the outside edge, and then the tip of it is going to be hollow, and normally you can either see a lead core inside or you're going to see more of this material. Now, a really expensive hollow point ammunition is normally going to have this nickeled case on it. So if you see a bunch of shell casings sitting on the ground and they are nickeled cases, not always, but most of the time, that's either somebody who takes their personal defense seriously, so not your average criminal, or it's issued ammunition. Most police departments that really care are issuing ammunition that's going to have some sort of nickeled casing on it. And most people, when they see the price between casings that are nickeled for their ammunition and unnickeled casings, they go, it's not really worth it. It only gives a slight advantage for the ammunition for lubricity in extracting and using the ammunition and having to reuse the same ammunition, recharging it every day. Not a huge advantage, a little bit of an advantage. So if you see nickeled casings, that's actually fairly unusual on most crime scenes, and at least in bad neighborhoods. Less common on scenes is going to be revolver ammunition. Here's some very common revolver ammunition up against 9mm, so you can kind of get a size scale, because that's what most people today, especially younger people, are familiar with who are into firearms. This is a 9mm ball round, the same one that we looked at before. This is a 38 special. Notice the nickeled casing, but it is just a ball round. That's because this is a reload. So be aware that that is out there as well. Just because it's got a nickeled casing doesn't necessarily mean that it's expensive ammunition. It could just be a bunch of reloads that somebody got good casings in order to do reloads on. This is a 38 special casing, and this is a 44 Magnum casing. Now, you don't normally find these on crime scenes because revolvers don't discharge the casings out of the gun when they're fired. So if you do find these, they're normally going to be all in a pile in one place. I mean, somebody ejected the casings and then tried to reload the revolver. The more common way back in the day than it is today, but not really common overall on most scenes over the course of humanity, because most people don't reload during a gunfight. They just shoot and then they're done. So revolver casings, you can tell two different ways. You're going to have, actually, that's a 357 Magnum, didn't even notice that. Revolver casings, you're going to have different head stamps that are going to differentiate. You know, this is a 44 Magnum, this is 357 Magnum, and then the companies that manufacture them. This is an example of Federal and Hornady. But the way that you can tell, even if you don't know what the cartridges are, is the difference in the case rim. So you can see this is a 9mm, so this is a semi-automatic rim. And you can see it lines up pretty well straight with the wall of the cartridge. And then on your revolver cartridges, most, but not all of them, most of them are going to have a rim that sticks out a little bit along the outside edge. That's integral to the function of most revolvers. Again, there's 9mm revolvers, and there's 40 Smith & Wesson revolvers, and there's 10mm revolvers. They all use wound clips. I know about all that stuff, but in a broad general sense, when you're in a crime scene and you see these casings, these generally are from a revolver. If you find 357 or 44 mag casings and they're laying on the ground like it was shot out of a semi-automatic, that is not something that is impossible to find, but it is just not very likely. The guns that operate in a semi-automatic fashion with revolver cartridges, especially these Magnum revolver cartridges, Desert Eagles, they're not really common on crime scenes. It could happen, but that's in a broad general sense what we're looking at. When we get into bottleneck cartridges, we're talking about FN57 and 223, mostly on scenes, although we get 308s, 7.62 by 39, things like that as well. This is an FN57 round, this is 223 5.56, and this is a 308 casing. So as you can see, we'll do our scale here to 9mm again so everybody can see. These are semi-automatic rifle cartridges. Most rifle cartridges do not have a rim like a revolver. Some of them are out there that do. Things like the Mosin Nagant, other old-timey cartridges, I guess you could say, have those types of rims. But most of them have a rimless casing like this, where the edge of the rim is even with the case wall. Most rifle cartridges being used, most of them you're going to find on crime scenes today, are not straight wall cartridges, although there are ones that just look like massive 44 mag rounds. Things like 45-70, really old rifle cartridges can have straight walls. Most of them are going to have some sort of taper up at the end. So here's FN57. These are used in 5.7 pistols. This is 223 5.56 cartridge. This is commonly used in AR-15 rifles and pistols. And then you've got 308, which is more common in battle rifles and bolt actions, things like that. And this isn't to give you an idea of all the rifle cartridges. We could sit here all day talking about the specs of different rifle cartridges and casings. It's just kind of give you a general idea of what these things look like when you find them on a scene. And these are really common ones, along with 7.62x39. So there is your head stamps on them and what the ends look like. Very similar to pistol casings as far as head stamps and the way the primers work. You can see you've got little primer pockets in there, head stamp writing, and then the strikes on the primers are all right there in the middle section. You can see this is what they look like as brand new cartridges. Unstruck primers. Primer still in the center. This one's got a little divot on it. That's from being chambered and then not used on an AR-15. I know a lot of people think that's not a real thing, but it is. All of them, they have floating firing pins, most AR-15. So if you chamber them and you don't use it, when you pull the cartridge back out, it's going to have a little divot on it. That's what rifle cartridges look like. And what all of that means. And then we've got shotgun shells. Shotgun shells are nice because most of the time your shotgun shells are going to say right on the outside of them what they are. Very, very convenient. So we'll give you our 9mm for scale again. So this is what 12 gauge 2 3/4 inch shotgun shells look like. There's your 9mm for scale. Over here you have a very common shotgun shell. This is 9 pellet double-aught buck. It's going to say right on the outside 9 pellet double-aught buck, and then that's the crimping at the top. It tells you there's a bunch of shot inside of this. There's little tiny balls in there. This is a target and range type or duck hunting type shell. You can see the brass in the top. This one has been expended already. It's kind of an old one. So these are two different varieties of slugs. This is what the shells look like. They tell you right on the outside. This is a copper solid. This is a 2 3/4 inch, 1 ounce rifled slug in here. You can see the lead at the top, and you can see the copper solid inside. These things of note go through lots of stuff, and they leave really big bullets behind when they do that are fairly easy to find on scenes. When you get to a crime scene and you see these different things, we already talked about the difference between new and old fragments. So that's a new one, and that's an older fragment. These are just lead fragments. We can also look at what this type of thing, what a rifle round looks like after it has hit something. So here is your rifle round. We looked at it before. It's the same .223 round, and this is what a fragment of that bullet looks like after it's gone through some stuff. You can see that's the back of the bullet itself, and then this is the area that would make up the tip. So orienting it properly to the rifle round, this is kind of the orientation of what this would look like. That's the back of the bullet, and then all of this stuff wraps around to that hollow tip. So when it hit, it split open, the core disintegrated or flew all over the place or dumped energy into a target, and then this is the leftovers of what's left over from the outside of the bullet there. These are shotgun slug pieces. This is actually a piece, an older piece, used to be a lot nicer, of a lead core from a shotgun slug that went through God knows what on the range. I think that was from breaching. And then this is a plastic wad, and then this is the end of one of these shells inside. And then I had a fiber wad, I think I showed you guys earlier, a piece of the fiber wad that's left over when these fire between the powder and the slug itself, or the pellets. And then we've got various pieces of handgun round that I'd like to show you guys. This is what a lot of these things look like even just a couple days later. This is a piece of a bullet. This is the core of a bullet. Probably, given that there's rings around it, that may just be a lead bullet. This is what a handgun round looks like, a ball round, after it stops after going through some 2x4s and stuff on the range. So when this is very commonly what it's going to look like. Maybe a little less corrosion, a little more copper colored, but this is kind of the shape that you're looking for on the ground when this is what a ball round looks like after it goes through like a door or, you know, a few walls in a house. You can see that's the base of the bullet, and that's the casing there, and this is what ends up happening to the tip of it. And then this is just a piece of a round, and God knows what it is or what it hit. Probably a chunk off of a steel plate at the range, but these are the types of little fragments. One round could be fired, and you could get this, and then the core, a piece of the core of this falls off, and you've also got that nearby, and that's from one round. Those two. So what do these things tell you on crime scenes? Well, if you've got little .22s, things like that, and it's on a crime scene, in all likelihood it was a very small pistol that fired them. Sometimes you can get these from rifles, but in most of the time it's a very small pistol. If you've got a brand new little BB and a broken window, someone shot that window out with a BB gun. If you've got 940 or 45, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, these are from handguns. So this might be, if you've got 5 or 6 of these laying on the ground, it might have been something where 2 people didn't know they were going to go into a gunfight and decided to anyway. If you've got 33 or 34 of them on the ground, it might be that somebody has a Glock with a switch and decided to go after somebody, and you've got a whole bunch of those laying on the ground. If you find revolver shell casings, and there's one here, one there, 5 feet away, one there, 6 feet away, one there, 4 feet away, and they're not all like somebody had 6 of them and dropped them all on the ground, or 7 of them, or 8 of them and dropped them all on the ground in one spot. It might be that you've got someone with a pretty high-end handgun, in all likelihood stolen, that they used in a crime. If you are finding FN57 rounds 2 through 3 or 308, in all likelihood, somebody went out looking to shoot at somebody that day. This isn't the type of stuff that you carry around just for funsies. A 223, even the smallest guns, 308 the same, even the smallest guns that carry those, not convenient to carry. FN57, convenient to carry, but pretty expensive. Even today, the prices are coming down significantly. My 5.7 pistol, I got it used for like $700, but still, that's a very expensive handgun, and you have to mean business to go out and spend $50 on a box of 50 rounds for a handgun round. Also of note, this type of stuff, not so good for your soft armor vests. So if you're finding these a lot in your town, it might be a good idea to start thinking about some hard rifle plates, some sort of rifle protection. Shotguns, shotgun slugs, most shotguns are pretty big. Most of them are really, really big. You can get little 410 shotguns that are revolvers. Most people aren't using those in crimes. They're also not super effective. But if you're finding 12 gauge, 16 gauge, 20 gauge slugs or buckshot, somebody in all likelihood is running around with either a very large gun or something that they did a hacksaw job on. And if you are finding pieces of fragment on the ground that look like this, that are fairly clean, that is a fresh fragment on a scene. If you're finding casings that look like these over here, these are fresh casings on a scene. That's fresh stuff laying on the ground. And so that's not something that happened 4 days ago. That happened the same day. Probably don't want to walk right past those if you're getting called because there was a shooting out in the street and you say, oh, I don't know if those are old or new. Well, those are new. Those are new. And if they look like this, but the shooting just happened, let's say you've got ShotSpotter in your town, like I do, and you go out for a ShotSpotter and then you find something that's all corroded and nasty with holes in it and it's all dented up, that might have been from a previous incident. Not guaranteed, but might have been. So ordinarily when I do this training, it is with a big old bag of casings so that people can feel them in their hands, so they can see the physical size of them in front of them. And I recommend that if you've got somebody that is really good on the range, of your firearms instructors at your department, go up and talk to them, see the different types of shell casings, handle them, let them explain what the different rounds do so that you understand them when you see them on the street for the first time. I hope this little primer was good for you. Obviously, if you're doing this type of thing on the street in real life, you're going to be an evidence tech or something like that. There's going to be more formalized training on this type of thing, hands-on training where you can physically take the casings, feel them in your hand, and see what they look like up close. I'm hoping that this primer helps some people out that are maybe starting off on the job, and so that when they see this in the real world, they don't think that that's just a piece of jewelry or something on the ground. They realize, hey, yeah, that's actually that's a bullet. That's a piece of a bullet. And that when they see something like this, they don't go, ooh, that's a little tiny. What is that? What is that thing? I don't know, that looks like a rifle round, but it's really tiny. I don't know what that is. Or at least they know whether it's old or new shell casings when they're out there responding to things. If you have any comments or questions, throw them down in the comment section down below. I'm sure that's going to be fantastic on a shell casing video. Till next week, you guys be safe and take care of each other. That's been your free field training for today. While you're here, check out one of the other videos that we made, or down here, subscribe so you can see more. Or you could check out Patreon, where you can see how you can get your name put on the videos, like all these fine folks over here. I'll see you guys next time.